This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
All right, I guarantee this is going to be a good show, and you're going to go, Jesperson, you would guarantee that every single show is going to be a good show. But I really mean it on this one. Okay. Johnny Hicks, Johnny Infamous, the intrepid technical producer of this show. We've got Ian Runkle joining us in like half an hour's time. Runkle of the Bailey, as hundreds of thousands of people know him. Canadian lawyer. He's a criminal defense lawyer.
Yeah.
He's a firearms lawyer who specifically and quite pointedly took great issue with a couple of comments that were made, in particular, a couple of promises made by Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney when he was on this show approximately 2 weeks ago when he joined us on the 10th of September. So Runkle, who's got a ton of experience, obviously practicing criminal law, but I would say no, it's not even an argument. It's a fact, is way more well-known for his advocacy, for his YouTube channel, for his posts offering legal analysis, etc. Sniffed out a couple of statements made by the Prime Minister that he just straight up calls lies.
He calls
it garbage. He calls it lies. And we were sharing with Real Talkers over the past, 10 days or so, the number of emails we've got, the feedback we've got, not a lot of it generous, not a lot of it kind, but pretty harsh criticism from Canadian gun owners, from gun enthusiasts, who are taking issue not only with the Liberal gun plan, which we'll get into it with Ian as well, but some of the stuff that Carney said on the show. So we reached out to Ian. I just said, hey, listen, come on the show. Yeah. Let's talk about it.
I'm ready. I'm ready for a Runkle debunkle. Is that what's going to happen here?
A Runkle debunkling.
But we were talking about this. Like, we had limited time with the Prime Minister. I thought you got into it. I mean, no one can say you didn't come out hot out the gates. And this was the one thing that people kept coming back to. Hey, we want to hear more on this. And you and I tried to dive in. This is a complicated issue. When we went to look at some of the firearms that are listed on the government's website.
Off air, we did a deep dive.
And you just copy paste Google, what does this gun look like? And I know looks of a gun can be deceiving, whatever, but we just wanted to see, like, most of them are in the AR category, but even you and I were confused. Some of these guns are old. Some of these guns are new. Some of these guns are automatic. Some of them are semi-automatic. Some of them look like assault rifles, but then you go Google, like, what are these used for? And it's like killing wild boar and keeping, the leeches that come on your farm from slaughtering cattle. So, like, I am excited today to have a Runkle debunk.
Oh, I'm looking. We'll see how he feels about your new branding. He may actually take it and run with it. This is a great. The live chat's kind of exploding. I'm assuming he's got a good number of his fans that are going to be tuning in today to check this out. A great comment from Just Joe, who says, "I'm not a gun lover, but I'm a Runkle of the Bailey fan." So there you go. We actually reached out to him. And he was slammed. He couldn't accommodate it, but he did reply to us, which I appreciated. He was offering like daily analysis of that Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. And maybe if we have time, we'll ask him about it, if maybe that's kind of where his YouTube channel really took off. But we look forward to it. Listen, this is a show where we say we seek to understand. The whole point of this show is for us to better be able to process or sort of like factually pick through what we're hearing for politicians and understand how it applies to our own lives. And like just Joe said in the comment there, I don't think that you have to be a gun lover or a gun owner to be interested in what the Liberal plan is. We'll get into that in more fulsome fashion, as mentioned, in 25 minutes, half an hour, when Ian Runkle joins us. But we also have some new polling across Canada, interesting numbers on where Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre are sitting right now, different scenarios. But Carney's got the minority government, so if he wants to get anything passed, he's going to need support from at least some opposition members. Meantime, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservatives, yes, he's got that by-election out of the way in Battle River Crowfoot, won that with more than 80% of the vote. I think most people expected that, but here's where the rubber really hits the road, and Poilievre is inching toward a leadership review. And for any political leader, that's a big deal. In particular, Conservatives. This is not a shot at Conservatives. This is a fact. Conservatives are not afraid to chew up their own and spit them out if they don't think that they're the right leader for the job.
Of course.
We've seen it provincially. We've seen it federally before, so we'll get to pulling on that from Philippe Fournier.
Sorry,
what are you laughing at?
I'm just giggling because I can see. Let's get to Philippe because he's dealing with a furry friend, a feline that's getting in his
let's get him on
shot
camera.
here.
We want to see this. Philippe Fournier is the founder of 338 Canada, one of the country's most notable poll analysts, political commentators, and what, a cat lover? Is that right, Philippe? Who did you just shuffle off camera?
That was Vishnu, my little calico cat that wanted some attention right at the same time your show began. So yeah, she's a little attention whore. So, sorry, but yeah, she likes to have the attention, but now she's run away. So maybe she'll be back.
Our
We'll see.
calico, I don't know about the breeds. First of all, we're a very animal friendly show. We've had birds, dogs, cats. They've all made cameos. Probably other animals I'm forgetting. Is the calico cat wired like personality wise to desire a bit more attention than the others?
I would say yes. However, maybe I'm a bit biased on this, but she's very affectionate, especially when I'm working. At some point, she goes, "Okay, enough computer now. If you don't listen to me, I'll sit on your keyboard." So that's what she started doing. But we're all good. I'm focused on you now, Ryan.
Okay, well, good. As long give us 65 to 70% of your focus for any animal lover we're interviewing. We'll take that. Those numbers are good. Philippe, I want to get into the federal talk. I want to get into what polling is telling us about how Canadians are feeling about our relationship with our American neighbors. But you have, like, hot off the press, you're privy to some polling. Is it from Cardinal that's giving us some insight into what these mayoral races might look like in our home province, in Calgary and Edmonton in particular? These are brand new numbers. What do we know?
So early in September, Léger had published numbers for both the Calgary and Edmonton mayoral races, but those numbers really did not tell us anything. The leader in Edmonton had 12%, so it was an open race with a lot of undecideds. And this morning we have numbers from Cardinal Research in Edmonton. Here are the numbers. So Michael Walters, 15%. Tied with Andrew Knack, 15%. And Tim Cartnell is at 13%. 50% undecided.
Jeez.
So it's an open race in Edmonton. And Ryan, in Calgary, Mr. Farkas appears to have some daylight now between himself and the incumbent GOT Conduct. He's leading 34% to 15%, still 21% undecided in Calgary. So it appears that Mr. Farkas is should be now considered the favorite. But we know with these mayoral polls, sometimes they can be a little difficult, especially we know the numbers are volatile, but we'll keep an eye on this in the next month.
Okay,
I think it's a month from now, right?
Yeah, it's coming up on the 20th of October. So, yeah, just a little bit less than a month. If I know anything about Jeremy Farkas, if he hasn't already, John, he'll pop up in our live chat, powered by Park Power at some point, and he'll say, "What's the topic today?" And I suppose that he'll probably be pretty happy to hear that he's got a 19-point lead on the incumbent, 21% undecided in Calgary, 50% undecided in Edmonton. Any insights there?
Well, I mean, I just looked at the numbers. It's 48% undecided, so close to 50%. But it looks to be a wide open race. And the fact that they introduce parties in municipal election doesn't seem to have yet an effect. Independents are doing well. But of course, the inclusion of parties at municipal level will see the effect over time. It may take a few cycles for that. But a wide open race in Edmonton this time around.
Okay. Hey, Philippe, and I know you're just like, you shot me a note to let people know like 10 minutes before we started talking. These numbers are in. We can go hot into Calgary and Edmonton's numbers. Have they just given you, or have they just released preliminary data on the front runners, or are you getting, like, does it show us in Edmonton, for example, how the Raheem Jaffer campaign is doing, or does Calgary tell us how Sonia Sharp's doing, for example? We talked to her yesterday. Yeah,
so Mr. Jaffer in Edmonton is at 5%. Then 4% for Mr. Mohammed, and then 2% for others. And in Calgary, well, there's a race for second place. We have Jeff Davidson is at 14%, and Sonia Sharp is at 10%. So this is the state of the race. So Mr. Farkas, I mean, I know it's a municipal poll that we have to be careful, but is it still almost a 20-point lead for the against the incumbent and the rest of the field? So he's in a good position with 1 month to go.
Yeah, I guess people that have, by the way, I don't even know if this is appropriate to read this to you, Philippe. This might be totally inappropriate, but we've got a comment here. I just lost it. Somebody says, ooh, the sexy French poll analyst says, I love me some Philippe first thing in the morning. People are happy to hear you. But when you come on here, you've helped us us sift through the data. You've helped us understand the trends, and people may say, okay, Calgary's mayoral race, there's like a 19, 20-point lead right now, which is a recent development, by the way. I think most people will recognize that. But folks may also remember past segments, interviews you've done with us where, a certain federal conservative leader had, for example, a 20-point lead in the polls, albeit over a different Liberal leader, over Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the time. But it did reiterate to us that things can change quickly. Oftentimes, it depends on some sort of a significant or major development. So that may not be the case. They may not be what's looming down in Calgary. But when you look at a 20-point lead with approximately 4 weeks to go before an election, how safe does that leader feel, or how safe should they feel?
Well, it depends how what the numbers are for you. If I say a 90% chance of winning, in the heads of many, it's a sure thing. But there's still a 1 in 10 chance that you lose. So it's hard to put odds, especially with a poll that has been done by IVR. And again, municipal polls, the turnout is usually really low. Last time in Calgary, only 46% of voters voted. And so if it is the same kind of turnout this time around, there are many people who may answer the poll but may not vote on election day or an advance vote. So I would remain cautious. But again, 19-point lead is well above the margin of error of the polls. So Mr. Farkas should be considered a moderate favorite at this point.
Okay. Philippe, at 338canada.ca, where we just so appreciate your insights, including your Sunday updates. Most recently, you've posted the numbers show Canadians are losing faith in the U.S. partnership. You might put it, we're losing faith in our American friends, in our American neighbors. What's new here? We know the relationship's been strained, but what's new?
Yeah. So this was a poll conducted by Ipsos on the heel of comments you may have heard from the U.S. ambassador. He was at the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, I believe, giving a talk and saying how he was disappointed that Canadians were anti-American and that they were not interested in a relationship with the United States. And then this poll comes out. So the question is, to what extent do you agree with the following statement? And the statement was, we can never trust Americans the same way again. 60% agree. 16% disagree. So a 4-to-1 ratio that agreed to the statement, and it reached a majority of voters in every polling region. So including Alberta. In Alberta, it was 59% agree, 16% disagree, so very close to the national average. This tells me that the discontent and the disappointment with the United States and the relationship Canada-United States, it's from coast to coast. There were no big differences in genders and age or region. It's pretty widespread that Canadians are very disappointed in what's going on in the United States.
That's quite a thing, though, I mean, sort of, when a pollster reaches out to you when you're participating in something like this, somebody asks, will you ever do something again, or will you never feel the same way again? For people to say that obviously goes beyond the 4-year term of any given president. Any insight? I mean, do Canadians feel like betrayed by the American electorate, or what do you think it is?
Well, you saw the numbers. The traveling to the U.S. has been significantly down by plane and by bus and by car over the summer. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I saw the numbers from StatsCan. So clearly there's a movement in Canada that says, you know what, we'll sit this one out the U.S. You figure your stuff out and maybe we'll come back. But the disappointment, as I said, those numbers tell me it's not even close, right? If it was 30-40, I would say, okay, it's close enough. 4-to-1 ratio that say that they never can trust the Americans again. It says that it could last this damage. It leaves a deep cut, as one would say.
Okay, so Canadians are sort of sticking with the same top priorities, I guess those so-called election priorities from back in April, the economy and housing. Yeah. Top concerns right now. Got into, by the way, a pretty interesting conversation with Max Fawcett a few episodes ago around where environment stacks up on this. And as it stands right now, it's folks' bottom lines, right? It's the dollars and cents, the kitchen table conversations that Canadians are having. What does Research Co. tell us with their new poll?
So they ask Canadians, their panel, which leader is the best suited to deal with those issues. So, and it was a long list, including housing, national unity, foreign affairs, Canada-US relations. And Mr. Carney was doing pretty well on these, even though the varnish has been a bit off of Mr. Carney. We saw the honeymoon has gone down in the satisfaction numbers from many pollsters. But according to Research Co., based in Vancouver, the Conservatives only lead the Liberals in one issue, and it's crime and safety, and which is not a surprise considering what the Conservatives have decided to talk about now that the House is back in open. They talk about crime, public safety. This is a good issue for the Conservatives, but across even energy pipelines, 39% Mr. Carney and 34% Mr. Poilievre. This is pretty close. Usually on the pipeline and energy project, the Conservative leader has an advantage. We don't see that in those numbers right now.
Okay. Now, interesting situation, not unprecedented certainly, but Mark Carney's going to have to find votes outside of his caucus, right? If the Liberals want to really accomplish anything in this session, it's the challenge that any minority government has. You've been crunching the numbers here. The NDP isn't exactly the go-to like it once was for the Liberals, but depending on the situation, there's going to have to be some bridge building here. Take us into the story, Philippe.
Well, here's the thing. The NDP normally would probably not accept a budget that has huge increases to the military spending and at the same time tax cuts. But there's only 7 of them in the House of Commons, and they have no leader right now. And so let's remind your viewers, if the budget fails to pass, we fall into an election. And so the 7 NDP MPs will have to wonder, will they show up for that vote? Will they be too busy? Will they have a relative that needs help at home or something? And the same thing for the Bloc Québécois. I mean, Yves-François Blanchet doesn't have much business helping Mr. Carney, but would it look really bad if you are the cause of the country falling into a second election in the same year? This is going to be a very interesting dance because I do not see the Poilievre Conservatives supporting the budget in any numbers. Monsieur Poilievre has to think of his own leadership review in January and helping the Liberals. I don't think it's going to cut it for Conservative members.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll let everybody know that you and your colleague Eric Grenier get into this in your numbers podcast, which I encourage everybody to check out. You break down the current state of the poll, obviously, my man, and what they say about the stability of this parliament. And you've just touched on that, and I think it's an important point, Philippe. On one hand, the Conservatives want to do everything they can to prepare the party for another election. And I think a lot of people, anytime there's a minority government, we expect that there could be another election. Yeah. I mean, it could be 12 months. It could be 18 months from now. Whether or not that writing is on the wall remains to be seen. You have to wonder where the Canadian electorate would be at. The Conservatives had, I mean, despite a losing effort in that most recent election, had a strong showing. A lot of the numbers that they'll point to, it's kind of like, after, you watch the Super Bowl and the team goes, gosh, we did, we led in rushing yards or we kept our fumbles or whatever it is. You still lost at the end of the day, right? What the pushback might look like from Canadians who don't want to see, what is it? It's like $400 million to run an election, isn't it? I mean, the costs are astronomical. I don't know off the top of my head. I'll see if I can fact check that. But you have to wonder if the move, what's less popular, what's more unpopular for an opposition party, to allow that government to fall, to lose confidence in the House, or to cost the country a third or a quarter of $1 billion to go back to the polls.
If you're the Conservatives, you just hope that either the NDP or the Bloc Québécois say they will support the budget, or at least partly support the budget, so that you can have an out strategically. But in the numbers right now, you are correct, Ryan. The Conservatives did very well in that election. 41% of the vote, 144 seats. It's just that they were facing Mr. Carney, whose personal numbers were astronomical during the spring and the summer. They have gone down a little bit since then, but you look at several pollsters, including Abacus Data, which released regular numbers on the leaders. He has Monsieur Carney at plus 18 right now in favorability. This is when you take the favorables minus the unfavorables, whereas Monsieur Poilievre is stuck around the even mark. And that's the best number for Pierre Poilievre, because other firms, such as the Angus Reid Institute, has Monsieur Poilievre at minus 22. So at the best number that they have, Conservatives really like Monsieur Poilievre, but he doesn't reach out across the aisle for now in the public support.
Yeah, but that's it's kind of never really been his thing, right? It's kind of interesting because I think a lot of people, even Pierre himself, when he won that by-election back in August on the 18th, he said, this has been, what were the two words he used? I think he said hard work and humility. He certainly said humility. Basically said this has been a lesson in humility. And I know a lot of people, including Real Talkers in our live chat, have wondered, does that mean he's going to approach politics differently? Does that mean that he's going to run his office differently, that he's going to run the opposition differently? I'm not sure I can see it. I mean, you look at what got you there, don't you? And I don't know that his personality was what caused them to lose the election, although maybe it factored in.
Well, that's debatable, Ryan. And again, I will not go into editorials of things. I'm a numbers guy. I will stick with the numbers. But
even though I keep trying to take you there, Philippe.
I know, right? But Monsieur Poilievre was perceived as being so toxic for Bloc voters and NDP voters that these two parties tanked and the voters went to the Liberals to support Mr. Carney, who could be described as progressive conservatives. He's on the right of the Liberals, right? Traditionally, at least Justin Trudeau he is. And so there was a reason why the Liberals jumped from the low 20s to 44% in that election. Many Canadians did not want Monsieur Poilievre to become Prime Minister. And once that those numbers are in, it's really hard to convince voters otherwise. So perhaps the Conservatives are banking on the fact that Mr. Carney will fall at some point, and that's fair. But Monsieur Poilievre would have to find 2-3 points additionally in Ontario, in Quebec, in BC especially, to win 25 more seats and win the next election.
Hey, before we thank you for your time, Philippe, we had a conversation with Supriya Dwivedi. She's originally from Montreal, living in Toronto now, and she took us into some of the polling that we're seeing out of Quebec right now, and maybe the shift there is particularly, well, I'll let you get into the story, but it sounds like maybe where young voters are at. But could we see Quebec separatism 2.0? Like, could we see that flare up again?
It's always a possibility. Okay, it never went away, really. It's just it was dormant. But the numbers that we have right now in Quebec, which are, do not piss off the Quebec electorate. They can turn on a dime on you. Look at Monsieur Legault, the most popular premier in the country, and now he's polling in low double digits. But about the sovereignty issue, the Parti Québécois went from 15% in public support, and now they're averaging 38%, would win an election, would win a majority at the National Assembly. But during that time, support for sovereignty has remained flat around the mid to low 30s. And so it doesn't seem like it's possible, but you never know once you get those gears in motion what can happen. Next year will be a Quebec election. The Parti Québécois is favored, but its number one option for sovereignty, it's still not that popular, especially among older voters. So to be continued for sure.
Philippe, we always so appreciate your insights. It's always great to hear from you. And again, I want to encourage folks who are more curious than this 20 minutes has allowed to dig even deeper into polling across the country, literally every province, every territory. When there's new polling out, 338 Canada is on it at 338canada.ca. Philippe Fournier, the straw that stirs the drink there. Always a great friend of the show. Thanks for doing this.
Merci beaucoup, Ryan. Talk to you soon.
De rien. Thank you, my man. Wow, those Calgary numbers, and as a matter of fact, those Edmonton numbers too. That's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. I know that we'll have people listening from across the country that may not care at all, but just for like a perspective check, you've got 3 candidates in Edmonton, in Alberta's capital city. By the way, all 3 of them will be around this table on Friday, the 3rd of October. 8:30 Mountain, 10:30 Eastern for Real Talk's Edmonton candidate mayoral debate. That'll be Michael Walters, Andrew Knack, and Tim Cartmel. 2 points, like on election night, is a lot, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
2 points a month out is nothing.
Yeah.
And so
Things
Walters,
can change.
Walters at 15, Knack at 15, Cartmel at 13, with half of voters still undecided. Mm-hmm. That's nuts.
It seems like the last federal election, too. Like, people are holding, or maybe it is that they're decided they're just not showing their cards, but people wait till the last minute, and things, you know how it is, the news cycle. Something can happen where someone says something, God forbid it's about infill, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
A week out, that changes a voter's mind.
Absolutely. No DUIs. Everybody Uber home. You know what I'm saying? Not to say any of them would
Keep it clean.
I'm just saying, keep it clean. That was the worst time. We don't see this a lot in municipal elections, right? We don't see someone
Be
like
seen at
holding
local
the truth bomb
places, buying as much as you can. And
this guy locked me in my locker when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And that story comes out 5 days out. But a three-way race in Edmonton. Raheem Jaffer falling off a little bit to 5%. I had seen him as high as 7, 8, 9, depending on the polling you were looking at. But that's kind of what happens in the campaign. Campaigns are long, and there's many different debates. We were sharing with Real Talkers in our Alberta Wins feature last week, presented by Play Alberta, how I had hosted that mayoral forum presented by the ECVO. It's the Edmonton Chamber of Voluntary Organizations. So a lot of nonprofits, volunteer-driven organizations. Yeah. So the context and the content, for that matter, in that debate is significantly different than the debate that was hosted by our friends at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, for example. It had a lot about business and bottom lines and red tape and development and economic opportunities,
and
right?
I'm sure our debate is going to be one you want to tune into. Maybe, Jaffer, maybe he came across, a little differently to people on our show. And that's the difference with our show and a modern debate where you're 10 feet from each other. These guys are going to be around this table a foot from each other, and the things they're going to be saying may come across a little differently.
Absolutely.
So be sure to turn in. This is probably the most exciting roundtable we've had in the last 2 years that I'm excited for. So Friday, October 3rd, 8:30, Edmonton mayoral debate right here on Real Talk. Can't wait. Will they all be wearing blue suits? They're all very colorful characters, very well dressed.
Yeah, we'll see how they roll into this one. I'm excited to have it happening in person, so that'll be good. A reminder that while we won't be featuring every candidate, and again, on the 10th of October, our Calgary mayoral debate, and we do have 5 candidates confirmed for that one. We're not doing it in studio. We're doing it remotely. So, technically we have some ability to include more participants there, but even that Calgary debate, there's a lot up for grabs here. I mean, a 34 for Farkas when it comes to decided voters. Gondek at 15, Jeff Davison at 14, Sonia Sharp, who was on yesterday, at 10. 15, 14, 10. As a strategist, you're looking at that, I think, as a surmountable. I mean, if you're sitting at 10 points in fourth, again, this is polling. Take it for what it's worth, right? They'll have their own. They'll have some of their own data. They'll have the information they're getting at the doors, but a 20-point lead a month out. Interesting to see how that's going to go.
I mean, that's amazing. I'm glad that Farkas is a regular joiner to our chat. I'm glad that all the mayoral candidates have either been on the show or are fans of the show.
Right.
I'm hoping, and I'm going to look into the camera and say this, you might be able to help with some parking tickets, whoever wins.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly. Well, we write that in. We write that into the deals. We write it into the agreements. Yeah, we expect to have a straight shot to the the bigger shows. You can't do this sort of thing. But John has worked hard behind the scenes to negotiate. What you got to do is get one of those. Are they like the parking passes or the license plates?
The ones you put
mayors
on your
get in some cities. And I think you can just pull it right up on the curb at the library, or just pull into any fire hall, cop shop, whatever you want. You can park there.
Parking.
Yeah, we're gonna get into the gun debate, and Ian Runkle is going to be joining us. As far as I know, he's probably the most well-known Canadian lawyer online. His YouTube channel, with more than a few 100,000 subscribers, he offers legal analysis, and in particular in his area of expertise, which is criminal defense and firearms law. So he pushed back big time on our interview with Carney. Obviously, that's the type of thing that we want to follow up on. That's the whole point of the show. It's the promise that we make to you. That conversation coming with some context. We're going to play the clip. We'll play something from Danielle Smith first. We'll play me asking the Prime Minister about it next, and then we'll get Runkle of the Bailey on to take us into why he took such issue with that interview. Before we do, I want to let you know that this episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of Pathways Alliance, and I think that most people will recognize that Canada benefits from a strong energy sector. The PM himself said that on this show on the 10th of September, and the oil and gas sector supporting almost 500,000 jobs, 446,000 jobs across Canada, while generating billions in tax and royalty revenue. The contributions of the oil sands industry are funding bridges, roads, schools, and more. Pathways Alliance is 6 of Canada's largest oil sands companies working together to help grow Canada's economy. You can learn more about the Pathways initiative. Carney actually talked about it. It came up specifically in our interview. Just visit the website, pathwaysalliance.ca. I'm happy to let you know that the University of Alberta Alumni Awards are celebrating the bold thinkers, the passionate leaders, and purpose-driven grads who are making a lasting difference in their communities, their professions, and beyond. The Alumni Awards are some of the university's highest honors, spotlighting alum who go beyond success to create true impact. And behind every award is a story of persistence, innovation, and transformation. You can get inspired in person by joining the celebration Thursday, October 23rd at the Horowitz Theatre. Love that venue. Doors open at 7, ceremony at 7:30. And you're going to be able to, basically celebrate in the journey of many of these U of A alum. You can check out more details. Get your tickets today at uab.ca/nominate. Have a look at the nominees and get a better sense of what this is all about. Again, uab.ca/nominate. The Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, we mentioned that debate that they hosted. Absolutely fantastic job there. Well, they've got their municipal candidate meet and greet coming up. That's this Friday, September 26th from 9 to 11 a.m. at the World Trade Center downtown. That's basically Edmonton Chamber HQ. You can find those details on their website. That's edmontonchamber.com. Get your tickets today. This is going to be a neat opportunity John, it's going to be really neat. It's going to be a real neat opportunity to meet candidates from every ward and at least 6 mayoral candidates. I all of a sudden just became like 97 years old. But here's your chance to correct. And I love when they're doing it because there's going to be candidates from wards across the city, plus a bunch of mayoral candidates in a kind of a shoulder-rubbing, mixing and mingling type situation. That's what the chamber's all about. They're also going to be highlighting key recommendations from their municipal action plan on strengthening Edmonton's economy. They'll have some light refreshments. Member tickets, $10. Win-win. Reserve your spot today at edmontonchamber.com. And if you do have business on the mind, if you got your mind on your money and your money on your mind, I want to make sure that North Road Investment Council, I'm just on fire today. North Road Investment Council at northroadic.com is a steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. Marshall McAllister, who was on the show just a few days ago, talking us through, me basically sharing my nightmare story of self-directing a big investment that went completely sideways. And then Marshall basically told us how to save our retirement from decisions like that. In a bigger picture, this is what they do with successful businesses and really successful families across the country. A lot of their clients come from real detail-driven professions. So they work with a lot of architects, dentists, engineers. If that sounds like you, and you'd like to talk about the destination of building a financial plan, the team at North Road is wide open to a conversation. You can find them online at northroadic.com.
All right, I'm ready for a Runkle debunkle.
All right, is Ian hanging out? Well, let's do it. We're going to put this right to him, and he's going to go, will you please get Johnny to knock off that news segment idea?
Horrible.
Let's set the scene. And I've actually been looking forward to chatting with Ian for a long time. As I mentioned, we first reached out to him based on his coverage of that Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. It's been really remarkable to see his platform and the commentary grow since then. Before we get to Ian and bring him in, I want to provide some context for this interview. So here's the deal. I want to play a clip for you from Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith first, and then I want to play a clip for the Prime Minister on this show. That gives you the background, and then we'll head into it with Ian so we have the context. I don't want to assume that every single person watches or listens to every single show. So Danielle Smith has been rolling out this Alberta Next, these town halls through the summer. Most people are familiar with that. Many of you may have joined them in person at different jurisdictions, towns, and cities across the province, or maybe you've streamed them online. An audience member asked a question within the last month about firearms and the Liberal government's plan to, quote, confiscate firearms. And that was when Alberta's Premier basically said that her province is not going to play ball.
The proper use of the criminal code power is the way the feds will regulate around, for instance, vehicular homicide. Like, there are ways that you can use your car that kill people, and they look at that as a criminal penalty, and they charge you. But you know what they don't do? They don't come in and say, red cars have a disproportionate number of accidents, therefore we're going to ban red cars and confiscate them, right? They're able to see that there is one use of that particular piece of property that is criminal, and they let us regulate who gets a driver's license and who registers a car. So I'm just going to take that analogy a little bit further. They can regulate the criminal use of firearms. They can go after the bad guys who are breaking into people's houses with crossbows. And we will then regulate the legal use of firearms so you can continue to own them, collect them, use them for sport shooting, use them for hunting, and use them for other purposes. So we're working right now on what a legislative framework for an Alberta firearms license would look like. And we're going to fight it out because property and civil rights are our jurisdiction under Section 91 of the Constitution. 91 or 92, I always get those. I think it's Section 12. I'll have to defer to my judge on that. But that is as you've seen, we have already taken action in that regard. We told the municipalities, no, you can't have a handgun ban. That is not municipal jurisdiction. We told the RCMP, no, you cannot participate in the confiscation scheme. We've told our sheriffs that. We have told municipal forces, if you want to participate in the confiscation scheme, you have to come and get a permit from the Justice Minister, and I have it on good authority. He will not say yes. There is a piece that we're missing because Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe said that any of the mail delivery services were not allowed to convey these firearms. We're going to have to change our legislation to make sure that that's not a loophole that they can use as well. We've also passed our own Firearms Act, and we will do everything we possibly can to make it as difficult as possible for anyone to get the permit that they need to participate in that program. That's our ability to do that, using our ability to regulate on professions. So in short, you'll see that us and Saskatchewan are going to do whatever we can to make sure that we're defending firearms owners' rights. And I know we're coming up to a deadline here, so just have some patience because we know how important that is. We just have a different approach we want to take in Alberta, and I think that is what the Constitution allows, and we'll see what the courts say about it.
Okay, so that's the full clip. That's the clip in its entirety. That's what Alberta's Premier had to say.
Yeah. Madam Premier, please let me fix your audio. It sounds like you're talking into a potato at that event.
But picking fights with the deck crew at the Alberta Next Battle. But it raised a lot of eyebrows.
Yeah.
And obviously you have kind of like, to oversimplify this, you have two different groups. You've got like the gun rights crew and the gun rights, sport shooters, hunters, gun enthusiasts and the like, operating legally. Nothing wrong with that. And then you've got, groups, special interest groups, you might call them, they want to see gun reform. These are a lot of times families of victims of crime and the like, and they're pushing on the Liberals to make this happen. So when we get our 20 minutes with Canada's Prime Minister, this is one of the things that we want to ask him about. And seeing as though he's sitting in our Edmonton studio in the Mercer Warehouse, right, in historic downtown Edmonton, we're going to ask him what he makes of Alberta's Premier's comment and where is the plan at. And here's what Mark Carney tells us on September 10th.
Prominent gun control groups urging you to act swiftly on election promises on firearms. Meantime, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith went on the record at one of her recent Alberta Next town halls. I'm sure you've been briefed on it, saying that all levels of government and police within the province, including RCMP, have been instructed not to participate in any gun confiscation. What do you intend to do on the firearms file specifically, and what do you make of Premier Smith's position?
I'm not going to, the exact quote, maybe I'll leave the quote aside, but I'll pick up one word there, confiscation. This is not about confiscation. This is about voluntary return of firearms for compensation, compensation of these firearms, and we'll run a process. Look, we'll have different processes in different provinces. I respect the decision of the province of Alberta and in their areas of jurisdiction, but this process will unroll. Canadians will have the
Alberta's Premier's mischaracterizing the situation, right?
Well, look, I didn't see the exact quote. You give my briefing maybe greater credit than it is. We're not confiscating guns. People aren't going around confiscating guns. That is anyone who says that is a mischaracterization. What it is an opportunity for Canadians to return guns for compensation. And let's be clear. We are not talking about hunting rifles. We're not talking or sport shooting or anything like that. We're talking about assault rifles. We are talking about weapons of, serious weapons, let's put it that way.
Okay, so that's the Prime Minister of Canada on this show on the 10th of September. Shortly after that interview, lawyer Ian Runkle releases a feature, about a 12-minute video on his YouTube channel that states that the Prime Minister is lying to Canadians. So, of course, we had to get him on the show. Ian Runkle is an experienced criminal defense lawyer. He's a firearms lawyer, and he is the man behind the popular YouTube channel, Runkle of the Bailey, making his Real Talk debut. Welcome to the show, Ian. Thanks for making time for us.
Oh, glad to be here.
You were all kinds of fired up, no pun intended, after our interview with Mark Carney. Said he was lying to Canadians. You said there were two lies in particular. Take us into it.
Well, the first thing is when he says that this is a voluntary program, it's not. And in particular, there's a very, very interesting bit of sleight of hand that's being used here. Now, we can see that this is being a talking point because exactly the same phrase as, this is a voluntary thing. We're hearing that from Minister Gary Ananda Sangr, mispronouncing it, but there we go. The Minister of Public Safety, as well as Mark Carney. They're both saying, oh, this is a voluntary program. And we're not confiscating anything. Well, they're not confiscating anything yet, but they absolutely will be. And because these are all banned firearms. The instant the amnesty expires, they're treated the same way you had an AK-47 or, a kilogram of fentanyl. So the way this will be, dealt with is eventually via police raids. They will eventually have to go and take these from people. And I've seen what those look like. They're not a nice process because the police, of course, if they're saying we need to go take guns from somebody, the first thing they're aware of is that person has guns. And so whether or not they think this person is necessarily dangerous, just out of caution, they roll up with many armed officers. They immediately want to take control over the people in the house, which means that, people end up in their front yard, proned out on the lawn, as an officer stands over them with a rifle. So when they say, oh, we're not going to be confiscating, absolutely they will, because that's what the law says. Once these are prohibited firearms, and they're prohibited firearms now, but you're protected by an amnesty, that's how they enforce that. But the little sleight of hand they're saying is, oh, well, the compensation program is voluntary. So having your guns taken is mandatory, but getting paid is voluntary. So because they're saying, well, you don't have to take the money, that, it's voluntary. And this is highly deceptive. It is very much a bit of trickery. And when you see this being rolled out as what is clearly a talking point, it's fairly clear that the intention is to deceive on this point, that the intention is to sort of confuse the public. And I think that is that's not a good thing, especially because this could endanger people. If somebody watches this and says, oh, the Prime Minister says it's voluntary, I don't have to give anything back. And we also saw the Minister for Public Safety saying, oh, it's voluntary in that leaked clip. And he said to his tenant, when the tenant was sort of pushing back on this, well, they probably won't have the resources to arrest you, which, is kind of crazy. But if somebody actually takes that seriously and follows that, they could end up facing one of these raids. And to me, that is, that is shocking. People could possibly die in these raids. So, especially if you had somebody who thought they were in the right, thought that, what are you doing in my house? You can't raid me. The Prime Minister said this is voluntary. It's incredibly irresponsible. It's incredibly deceptive. And there just really hasn't been the media pushback on this that there should be, because when there's such a blatant lie that's being sort of passed to people's faces, there really should be people saying, well, that's not true, is it? What's, when he says it's voluntary, what steps are they going to take to make it actually voluntary? And if the answer is none, then it's not voluntary at all.
Criminal defense lawyer Ian Runkle joining us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Ian, you talk about your clients. Like, has there been a precedent set? Have there been any instances of police, of RCMP, like as you describe it, kicking in a door, seizing firearms, unrelated to an investigation relating to a violent crime?
What now, because the amnesty is still going on, they're not yet confiscating these particular guns, except in some unusual circumstances. But what I've seen in the past is, for instance, you have somebody, maybe a military veteran, who calls one of his buddies and says, I'm having a real tough night. Like, I just want to talk through some things with you. And that buddy calls the police and says, Hey, I'm worried about this guy. And so that's a call where they've got, like, a concern about maybe this guy is depressed and so forth. And the raid they do is they'll send, 6, 8, however many officers, possibly an armored vehicle if it's in an area where they've got one. They go in with rifles drawn, they pull the people out, they drag them out. I've had people phone me as the police were setting up the raid, and so I've been on the phone on the other end of the call as I've heard people like freaking out because they're pulled out of their house and set down. And I've heard their children like screaming things like, please don't shoot my daddy. So these are incredibly stressful things. And that's what they do when it's, a call over this guy might have some depression. It might be, there's no reason to believe they're going to be doing it any differently if they think it's this guy has an AR-15 that he hasn't turned in. It's, there's no reason to believe they're going to use a different process than the one they already and sort of always use. I have seen some circumstances where they've done raids for other reasons, and these could be things like, in one case I'm familiar with, somebody got a protection order against them, and then were later charged for having these firearms because in the system they're just listed as prohibited firearms, and the RCMP and other police force systems don't actually give them a flag to say, hey, these are covered by the amnesty, maybe don't arrest for them yet. So we can't say for certain because, of course, it's predicting the future. But if they do these raids like they do other firearm-related raids, they're going to be fairly stressful, fairly violent processes.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I guess depending, of course, also on who's involved. I mean, every situation, every case could be different, right? I mean, let me ask you this, and one of the luxuries I think is of having an experienced litigator, an experienced criminal defense lawyer on the show is that I can ask you for your opinion on this. Why do you believe, if it's true, that Mark Carney is misleading Canadians or intentionally lying to Canadians, like you said, about this being a voluntary buyback? What would motivate him to do so? I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to manifest itself either way. Why would he lie?
PR stuff, right? It's the same reason why politicians do any talking points. Or it's possible that somebody has told him it's voluntary and that he's confused. But if he's been confused by somebody else misexplaining it to him, then that's itself kind of a pretty terrible thing. But it appears that when they're trying to sort of sell this move to the public, they don't want to be honest about what it is this move actually is. We're not... and the thing is ultimately they will be taking these guns from people. There's no indication, for instance, that they're going to be grandfathering these firearms. They haven't said anything like that. And certainly nobody's actually asked them the question. Like, are you going to be grandfathering these then? The Minister for Public Safety, when he was asked, okay, so how is it voluntary? His answer was, well, the police probably just won't have time to catch you. But he didn't say grandfathering. He didn't say anything like that. So we can conclude that that's not really the plan. It's, if you can't sell a policy on the honesty about what the policy involves, then it's probably not a good policy. And the problem that they have is that this does involve violence to enforce it. And it involves violence, for instance, against, hunters, against farmers. You're going to see Indigenous people who are raided for, and many of the people who are affected by this may not get raided now because a lot of these firearms are currently non-restricted. And so they don't know who's got what. But you may see these things turn into arrests and charges that can ruin people's lives 5 years down the road, 10 years, 20 years, because you'll have something like a farmer, maybe a guy on the reserve somewhere who hasn't really been following this, but has been listening to, oh, well, this is just the weapons of war. and doesn't realize that his hunting gun is also affected, or his plinking gun, and doesn't realize that his gun went from perfectly legal for him to have to something that is a major crime. So we'll see that sort of long tail of enforcement over potentially decades.
Yeah, and that's this is why I thought that it was particularly interesting. This is why we get him on the record, right? It's like why I asked him to respond to what Alberta's premier had to say. And I do want to push back on something. You say in your video, and by the way, I appreciate you sharing the interview. But you say you kind of call me out, and you say there's very little pushback from me to Carney. Halfway through the interview, I say to him, so what you're saying is that Alberta's premier is mischaracterizing the situation, right? And then he goes, I don't know about my briefing. I don't know about the exact quote, which is fair because I kind of threw it at him from an Alberta Next panel. I understand he can't see everything. But if you actually look at it, like if we get into the brass tacks of it, Smith says they're not going to participate in any confiscation. Prime Minister says that there's not going to be any confiscation. And to this point, there has been no confiscation. So doesn't there have to be a wait and see to see where this goes?
Well, we can take them at what they've said they're going to do, right? It's, if somebody says, I'm going to kill you, you don't necessarily wait for, is this guy actually going to murder me, or do I need to run away now?
But if somebody says, I'm not going to kill you.
The problem is that politicians do lie, and what they've actually implemented, like what they've set into practice, says that this is going to be not voluntary. And they have in the past made statements to say there will be no grandfathering, there will be no and even the minister, when he was caught in an unscripted moment talking to his tenant, he admits, if you keep this, and he says, you can keep this, it's voluntary. But he admits that the voluntary is just, you will be committing a crime. And he actually goes so far as to offer to pay his tenants bail if his tenant gets arrested, which is kind of shocking. He also offers to pay the tenant the difference between a fair price for the guns and what the government will actually pay for them. So we see what they say when they don't think they're being recorded, when it's not a press conference. We can see what actual legislative steps they're taking. And this voluntary line seems to have come out of nowhere, but it has no actual legislative or other steps behind it, such that would actually empower this to be actually voluntary. Now, they're going to be making an announcement in, I guess, about an hour as to the mechanics of their pilot project, and maybe they will have rolled out something new. But as early as 2 days ago, the minister's plan for voluntary was just, they're probably not going to catch you.
This is, for Ian, for people that aren't familiar with this is a breaking story, by the way, that you're referencing. Gary Anandasangri, he's Alberta, or rather, he's the country's public safety minister. Canadian press reporting this was leaked audio that the public safety minister telling a tenant, Ian, as far as I can understand the story, this is like his literal tenant. Like the minister is a landlord, so this is a property which is perfectly legal. It's fine, he can do that. I would suggest if you're a federal minister of the crown, the last thing you should hire a property manager, for fuck's sakes. But I digress. But so he's telling his tenant, who he goes on and later clarifies, says that I've known the guy for years. It sounds like his tenant. They were having a very candid, off-the-cuff conversation. The minister didn't realize he was being recorded, and then his tenant went and posted the audio where he makes some relatively troubling statements, says that he misspoke on it after the fact, but basically said that as the government has outlawed, for background purposes, about 250, or rather 2,500 types of guns that it calls the assault-style firearms, where owners will be, quote, fairly compensated for returning those banned firearms with an amnesty period extending until October 30th of 2025 to protect owners from outlawed guns from criminal liability up until October 30th. While they turn in or deactivate their firearms, he basically says, this is Canada's public safety minister, not figuring he's on the record, but being recorded, quote, I just don't think municipal police services have the resources to do this. He talked about the nearly $750 million budget for the buyback program. He basically goes on to say, in trying to address this individual's frustration, says my comments were misguided. But he talks about the political ramifications of this, as the Prime Minister has pledged to reinvigorate the government's stalled buyback program for assault-style weapons as part of his strategy to tackle crime and border security. It is worth pointing out that this Minister Anandasangri, this isn't the first time that he's been in the news around this. In a pretty effective bit of opposition politicking, I would suggest, a member of Parliament asked the Minister what the PAL stood for, what PAL stood for in Canada, the possession acquisition license. He was unable to deliver, and I think it's been a bit of a rocky patch for him. But where do you stand on the bigger picture of this incoming government having won an election? Mark Carney and special interest groups, lobby groups saying, listen, Liberals have been promising to do something about this since May of 2020 when those initial bans were announced.
Well, it's really telling, that exchange. I actually have the full audio of that exchange, and it starts out with literally just landlord-tenant stuff. They're going in and they're pointing out deficiencies in the apartment. And it's pretty clear that the reason why the tenant is recording it is the same reason you record a move-in or move-out inspection. And without prompting, there's the tenant doesn't bring it up. The minister brings it up and he says, oh, well, you're not going to like the announcement on Tuesday. And so the minister is explaining all of this, but he says, don't ask me to justify it with logic. And when he's sort of questioned about the value of this thing, not once does he say this will save lives. Not once does he say this will be good for Canadians. Not once does he say that this will be good for public safety. What he says is, well, we owe it to Quebec. And so and he also says repeatedly that if it was up to him to do again, he wouldn't do it this way, that this is not where the resources are best spent. And so it's pretty clear they know they have a dog of a policy, but they feel that they're committed to it. They don't want to back away from it, and they fear criticism from some of these public interest groups. So why are they going through and spending millions of dollars and dividing Canadians? Because if we look at the rural-urban divide in Canada, this is going to worsen that in a big way, as well as worsening east-west tensions and so forth. This is a really divisive policy. And when they know that it won't solve crimes, most of these firearms that they're targeting are the firearms least used in Canada in homicides. I would say the vast majority of the list probably has a used in homicide total of 0. They're not targeting the firearms that we know are commonly used in criminal activity. And the reason is that those are hard to target, because typically what we're seeing is short-barreled handguns, which are prohibited in Canada already, which are smuggled in from the US. And this will do nothing to stop that. This will do nothing to stem that tide. This is purely targeted at farmers and sports shooters, but it's done, and it's purely politics.
So, Ian, a big part of what we have to do is speculate and prognosticate, and that's a big part of what a talk show does. But are you telling me? I would be shocked to see it. Are you telling me that a federal government has plans to take tools for farming and ranching from rural Canadians across the country, right? From Victoria to Prince Edward Island, to come in and take shotguns, take rifles that they need to protect their herd, to keep their farms safe, to do what they do, hunters that fill their families' freezers. Are you telling me that you seriously think, and if this is your opinion, so be it. I just want to advance this conversation. But are you telling me that you think that's the plan that this government has, and that it thinks in its right mind that it would get away with something like that? I can't imagine any province, any jurisdiction in Canada that would tolerate that sort of rollout.
The thing is that's exactly what the ban does. Now, of course, one of the sort of centerpieces of the ban is the AR-15, which, because of its previous legal status as a restricted firearm, had one lawful purpose, which was target shooting. But it was the most commonly used firearm for the sport of 3-gun, which is one of the most popular sort of competitive shooting sports in Canada and the US, although 3-gun now is pretty much going to it's showing signs of dying out because it can't be used. You can't use or play three gun. You can't compete in it with sort of appropriate things for the sport. So, I used to travel to the US but I can't really now because I can't even practice for it. And so there's just no way for me to compete with that. But some of these firearms were popular for instance, plinking or like small animals, like people would use them to hunt grouse and some of these were popular sort of first rifles. So, for instance, the GSG-16, which was banned because it's got a look like a World War II firearm, but is in fact a semi-automatic 22 caliber rifle, which is like it shoots a 22 long rifle. It's a very small bullet. They were popular as something that like parents would give as like their first rifle to their kids. I've heard a lot of rural people primarily saying, I've had to explain to my daughter why she can't shoot her favorite gun anymore. And this kind of thing. It also includes shotguns. It includes, perhaps bizarrely, some of the items that immediately leapt to people's attention were a bunch of Purdy shotguns and these are like bespoke rifles that are specifically, you can't get one for like less than six figures. They're hand engraved, they're handmade, hand fitted. And nobody is taking a $100,000 safari rifle to their local liquor store for a stick up. Because if you've got a $100,000 rifle, you could probably afford, you could probably afford a bottle of vodka. And if you couldn't, you'd sell the rifle. But
Ian, do you think, is there the premier, and the reason why we wanted to play, it's pretty rare that we're going to play like a 2-minute clip, but I didn't want anybody to accuse us of trying to, cut out context or try to shape this conversation. I wanted to have Danielle Smith on the record from start to finish on that answer. And she basically says Alberta's going to fight this in court. She says Saskatchewan's with us. In your view, is there a credible constitutional challenge to the government's proposed reforms, or like at the end of the day, is this a policy disagreement as opposed to a rights issue?
I mean, I wish I could say yes, but we have the firearms reference case, which noted that firearm regulation is sort of an area of dual authority. So the province can regulate it under like the property and civil rights, arm, but the court concluded that the federal government can also regulate firearms under the criminal law power. So I suspect that if it goes up to the Supreme Court would say, yes, we already made this decision. We don't see a reason to deviate from it. We're going to go with our previous decision, and that this is, valid constitutionally, that the government can ban guns. But this is going to be sort of a giant jurisdictional fight as the province can't prevent the federal government from banning the guns, but they can, for instance, interfere with the buyback program. And so what they might be able to do is interfere with the taking the firearms for compensation, but they might be less able, for instance, to prevent the government from sending the RCMP to kick doors in later. Or they might be able to instruct the police, listen, you're not going to do this, in which case we end up with a province that is essentially saying we're going to refuse to enforce these laws. And there is some precedent for that. We've seen, for instance, British Columbia in the past has said we're not going to enforce certain drug laws. So there is some possibility, but it becomes a very chaotic sort of thing. And there is a real risk as to how this plays out. Because if you sort of extend this as far as it can, you can end up with, for instance, Alberta says we're not going to enforce any firearms laws. The federal government would say, well, then we're going to start revoking everybody's firearms license. And where does that go? Like, where does that lead?
I just can't see it getting to this point. Like, just realistically, I can't see it getting to this point. And I can see it in a scenario where someone is suspected, there's a warrant, right? And I'm not going to try to speak legalese to an experienced criminal defense lawyer, but the way that we see it, us civilians, Ian, is that if someone is suspected of committing a serious crime, and it is believed or known that there are firearms, prohibited or otherwise, in the residence, then obviously police are going to treat the situation with caution out of self-preservation and the like, right? So they can just, a situation as you've described it might unfold. But I just cannot see a government in its right mind going around to otherwise law-abiding citizens and confiscating their personal property. But I do have to ask you, because it's popping up again and again and again in our live chat, people asking about Australia, people asking about New Zealand. There have been what have been described as forced surrender programs. How familiar are you with that? And is there any application or any observation that you could make, something that should be on Canadians' radar in relation to what those nations have done?
Well, first, the Australian situation is complicated, and it's not very often accurately reported, and so there's a complexity to it that I don't know that we can get into here. But the main thing is that the Canadian experience in terms of firearm violence is not local guns. It's not Canadian gun owners, with a firearms license. What it is, because I do firearms law, and I see basically two separate buckets of clients. And the first bucket is like the people with a firearms license. And they almost always, when they're coming to me, it's either because they've had like a depressive episode and the government wants to take their guns, or it's been an issue with like storage or transport. Like they're driving to they've been out hunting and they forgot to unload the shotgun before they put it in the vehicle. That gets found by a fish and wildlife officer, and now they've got a criminal charge for transportation contrary to regulations, etc. The other category is people who've never had a firearms license and often have like 2, 3, 4 firearm prohibitions on top of that. And that's the category of people who are using them for violence. So you see the people who are driving around with a handgun tucked in the front of their pants. They never have a license. It's just unheard of. So the violence is being committed by the one group, and the other group is not just, not an issue. They actually commit homicides at a rate that is substantially below the general average. Now, that's largely because Canadian gun owners are monitored. If I go online and I post something, stupid, like, hey, I'm going to go and, like whatever, if I post something violent or whatever.
You're going to go shoot up a workplace.
Yeah, they'll come take my guns.
We want that, don't we?
Real fast.
Don't we want that?
This is the thing. The licensing system and the review system has been very effective in Canada, such that when you've got somebody who is who is a licensed gun owner, but like develops an addiction, what you'll typically see is they lose their guns before that goes too far, because, a family member will call in with concern and so forth. So we have a very effective system for preventing licensed gun owners from being a problem. The issue then is that it becomes it's difficult for the government to go after criminals because, of course, criminals don't follow the rules. And so, if you do what they've seen with buybacks in various countries is that when they do a buyback, the people who show up to turn in guns are never the drug dealers. They're never the people who are violent. You don't get a bookie showing up going, well, I was going to use this to shoot a guy who owes me some money, but instead I'm going to turn it in. So the category of actually solving the problem is a hard problem, but the issue of looking like you're doing something by banning a bunch of guns, well, that's easy to do. And you could do big press conferences where you can roll out the mission accomplished banner, but it doesn't actually help the situation. If you took every person with a firearms license and eliminated them from the firearms homicide pool, you wouldn't really notice statistically. If you took every one of these guns and, that is banned and had a magic wand to just vanish them out of existence, if the only way you could look at this was by looking statistically at the homicide rate, you would not be able to tell the moment when it happened by looking at the stats. You'd have, you couldn't actually observe the effect of that because it's going to be so small that it would just blend in with random noise. But for instance, if we had the same magic wand and we could prevent handguns from being smuggled in from the US, that would have a much larger effect. You could see that in a big way. And as time goes on, the ability of the government to enforce things is going to become less and less with respect to criminal use, because we're going to see more and more 3D printing. That's already becoming a thing. And it doesn't matter how many guns you ban from law-abiding, gun owners, if the criminals are just going to sit there like 3D printing themselves another Glock. So
That, by the way, blows my mind. The whole 3D printing thing. That's something I can't spend too much time thinking about right now. It's quite disconcerting, actually. People talking about being able to get through metal detectors and the like. Ian Runkle's our guest, criminal defense lawyer. If you're just joining our live stream in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, I'm referencing the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association for these dates, Ian, for these numbers. The amnesty order for owners of prohibited firearms, including some of the more recent bans, which means that lawfully possessed guns can be surrendered or deactivated without criminal penalties, in effect until March 1st of 2026. The government estimates that there are about 150,000 prohibited assault-style firearms in circulation in Canada as we speak that may be subject to surrender and compensation. The amnesty period is currently in effect when it comes to deactivated or surrendered firearms on that first government list, the 2020 list. The amnesty period expires on October 30th of 2025, which is basically 6 weeks from right now. That per the Government of Canada's website. Again, speculation, your gut instinct. Of those 150,000 suspected to be out there, how many do you think will be surrendered or deactivated? How many do you think will still be out there? And while I acknowledge you are not giving legal advice, you are not the audience's lawyer today, what is your message to people who currently own or possess the firearms on this list?
Well, right now, we don't know what the sort of buyback is going to look like. That number, by the way, is very low, that 150,000, because that number was from basically the first ban, which targeted primarily the AR-15. And so the AR-15s, they have registration data that they'll be able to use to follow up. But several of the follow-up bans covered firearms that have been both very popular, but also have never been registered, so they're not going to be able to track those down. So all of this is going to be a bit of a gong show. I'm sure that the amnesty is going to have to be extended. We're waiting they're making a policy announcement over that, so we're waiting to see that. But I'm certain that that'll be extended to give them a bit more time. Beyond that, I'm a lawyer. I can't tell people to break the law, and I don't generally think it's a great idea because, of course, they'll kick in your door. They'll drag you out of the house. It's not a fun experience. But I can't say how many people will actually comply. I don't know what those numbers will look like. And as I mentioned before, we're going to get two different kinds of non-compliance. You're going to get people who are intentionally not complying because they don't like the law, but you're also going to get a fair number of people who are just not complying because the terms like assault-style firearms are things that they don't think apply to their gun, because it's like, well, this is a hunting rifle. It's not assault-style in any fashion. That term, of course, is itself a marketing term, because when the government was pressed to define assault-style in court, they ended up having to admit that the term has no specific meaning, and it's only a label that they apply to anything they decide to ban. So there are no characteristics of a firearm that make it assault style other than that it's the thing the government has decided to ban. It's just a marketing label, right? If you want to ban something, you call it a scary name first, and that's it.
Well,
So
I mean, how about adding another layer onto this, Ian? Your assertion it's your position that the Prime Minister lied about this program on the show, and you're talking about the potential implications if it misleads somebody or if it leads somebody to believe that they don't need to participate in this or what have you. I mean, on the flip side, what about Premier Danielle Smith's comments? Right? I mean, I believe could be equally as influential in a firearm owner's decision to surrender or not surrender their firearm if they are under the impression that in the province of Alberta, absolutely nobody will visit their house and nobody will participate in any confiscation. Then what would motivate a good number of them to participate in the first place?
And there is certainly some danger to that too. If we have any politician saying, don't comply with the law, which includes the Minister of Public Safety, it seems like everybody seems to think that the answer to this is just don't follow the law, which is really interesting. But yeah, no, I actually have a video where I've said, like, listen, these politicians have said they're going to fight the buyback, they're going to fight the confiscation, but don't necessarily assume that that's going to protect you in any serious way. You're going to see the possibility of all sorts of issues that arise from this. And, anybody who sort of trusts that Danielle Smith could promise this forever is maybe a little optimistic, because eventually she's not going to be in power. And it could be that the next government, maybe there's an NDP government, and they decide that the thing they want to do is turn around and be super cooperative with the government. And, suddenly everybody who's sitting there going, well, they'll never actually raid me, is getting raided. So I wish that the discussion would actually just focus around, like, this is a bad policy. And when the Minister of Public Safety is telling his tenant, well, you don't have to follow it, I'll pay your bail if you, which is just wild when he's like, I'll pay your bail if you don't want to follow this law. When that's what we're hearing, then maybe the proper thing to do is not spend millions of dollars. And the thing people always approach me with, because, I'm fairly pro-gun, I like firearms, I enjoy target shooting, all of this stuff. They always say, well, if it saves one life, isn't it worth it? The thing is that the number of lives that would be saved from this, at the most optimistic level, you could probably count on the fingers of one hand. But I could save way more lives than that with the $750 million. Me personally, if you just gave me that in a bag of cash, like, I could walk down to the stollery and just be like, hey, here, save some kids. Sure. And they would. Or I could find somebody who's starving on the street and go, hey, let's put you in an apartment and give you some food. It's not hard to save way more lives with $750 million than they'll save with this. So
yeah, I mean, that's kind of the
life thing.
That's the age-old debate, right? If everybody that believes they can accomplish more with the hundreds of millions, wouldn't it be great to be able to go down to the stollery with $750 million? You certainly could change some lives. Before we thank you for your time, Ian Runkle, our guest, criminal defense firearms lawyer, you noted in the video, the 12-minute video where you analyze what the Prime Minister said in our September 10th interview, you said at the end, you said you're not necessarily giving Pierre Poilievre a pass on this either. And I want to ask you in closing to offer what concerns you, what you're seeing from the official opposition leader, what you would like to see from Conservatives, and ultimately, what you think the smart play is for the man who wants to be the next Prime Minister of Canada.
I mean, the problem is that there's always politics. So he's tiptoeing around whether he'd reverse the bans and so forth. That criticism was largely based on he's got a proposal for the stand on guard law for how to change self-defense. And from what it looks like, that proposal will basically do nothing, because the proposal is we want to change it so that you're presumed to be acting lawfully if you're defending your home against a threat. Well, that's already the law. There are useful things that could be changed on self-defense, and especially self-defense in the home. I think it's actually quite horrible that, for instance, a woman who might defend herself against, the creepy stalker who, decides he's in love with her after she smiled too long at him at the, at like the Starbucks where she works. And, that's not a criticism of her. That's a criticism of the way these guys think. If this guy's breaking into her house and she defends herself against him, I think it's fairly monstrous that our system sometimes decides that she needs to face charges and to go through that ringer, because we're essentially just re-victimizing people who have been targeted by criminals. But so that's my main criticism there, is I'd like him to see him do something actually significant there. But I mean, it's tough. If you look at Toronto and, downtown Quebec, these policies are popular, and part of it is because they don't understand what's going on, because the politicians are willing to use deceptive or misleading language. They'll say, these things are weapons of war. Well, which military is using the GSG-16, right? Which military is using this? They're using they're banned precision rifles that are used by long-range competitors. And these things are as tall as I am. They weigh a ton, and they cost like $25 to pull the trigger. Nobody's robbing a liquor store with these. No gangsters are shooting each other with these. But they'll describe them as assault style or weapons of war. And when the government is describing something that way, who wouldn't be in favor of a ban? But when you say, okay, these are sporting rifles and hunting rifles, then it's a different story. And so every time the government talks about this, they say voluntary, which isn't true. They say these are not hunting and sporting rifles, which is also not true. And so how do you fight back against this kind of government-pushed misinformation and disinformation, especially when we see the media is unwilling to challenge on these things? A politician can go on a major production, and it's going to sound like I'm calling you out here, but
you can call me out if you like, and I'll push back if I like. How's that? That's fair.
But it isn't just here, right? It's everywhere. You'll have, a politician will go on, a CBC thing, and they'll make a statement that is demonstrably false. Mm-hmm. And nobody says, well, that's not true, is it? Nobody says, isn't this actually garbage? It's a problem. And part of it is that a lot of the media doesn't have the knowledge to criticize on these things.
Well, Ian, let me say this, and I'm not going to come forward and defend all media. I think that would be insane, and I think that there are some probably people in the profession that are past their best before date or were never good enough to be there in the first place. But I will say this, as I perceive our role on a talk show, what we did is we take what Danielle Smith says, we put it in front of the Prime Minister and ask him to respond. He responds, you push back, we reach out to you, you come on, you clarify, we dig deeper. Obviously, I don't have the intimate understanding of the criminal code or the history of firearms in Canada that you do, number one, as a defense lawyer, number two, as a gun enthusiast. And so I think that the role that our show is playing, and I will only speak for myself, is advancing these conversations. The role that your YouTube channel is playing is helping people better understand how Canadian law actually works and applies to their personal lives and how you feel about what's happening in the news cycle. And I think bit by bit put together, all of us are accomplishing something where we're bringing to, I can see it in our live chat right now. There's, I say this lovingly, there's gun nuts in there. Some of my friends are gun nuts. They love their firearms. They're big into it. That's great. And then there's a lot of people in there that, some people probably believe that nobody should have any firearm whatsoever. I love bringing people from diverse backgrounds and perspectives together, seeking to understand those other perspectives, understanding the truth, cutting through the bullshit, which we hear oftentimes from politicians of all stripes. We know that to be true. And ultimately, at the end of the day, better understanding the laws of our nation and how those are impacting the culture of our nation. And so that's where I hope that this conversation has taken this. I hope that people better understand it. The last thing that we want to do, I'm not going to sit here and call a show Real Talk, and then somebody's critical of what they hear on the show, and then we try to stifle that opinion or act like, I want to learn more about it. I don't know as much about guns as you do. I know how I generally feel about them, but I do think that there's room for discussion and debate, and that's what this show promises to continue to deliver.
And I think it is important that we have these discussions. I mean, a lot of people have what I would call sort of movie ideas of firearms and what those involve. And I mean, for any of those people, like, come down to a range at some time. You will find that people there are fairly, fairly friendly, fairly willing to like show you around, show you, if you go on the local, whatever your local gun range is, and just say, "Hey, I've never shot a gun before, but I'd like to try it." I can guarantee you're going to find 5 or 6 people who will be like, "Yeah, sure, I'll arrange a range night. Come on down." See what, or come out and watch like one of the competitive events. See the ones that are becoming harder and harder to do. Cowboy action shooting, for example, because you can't buy new handguns, is eventually going to die out. But if you've ever wanted to watch something and just sort of, it's kind of charming. You've got people there in costumes shooting like old cowboy era firearms. So a lot of the thing is just, the more you learn, the more you can understand something, the better you'll be able to frame it. And there's a certain amount of this discussion that is driven by fear and by fear mongering. And I would love to see that sort of, go away. If you come out and you go shooting and you decide, "Hey, I don't like this. This isn't for me." Cool. But at least you'll be in a better position to, to argue your points and to understand what's going on.
Totally agree. That's the whole point of the conversation. And we're grateful for your availability, by the way. Like I said, we were trying to nail you down when you were covering that Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. One of our audience members, I think it was Ms. KD, said that was when you first wound up on her radar. You were like camping out outside the courtroom like every single day.
I was sleeping on the pavement.
But that was, I remember, because like I was familiar with who you were, but that was really when your YouTube channel took off, wasn't it? The Heard Depp trial, that was when things really skyrocketed for you.
Yeah, I was at about 50,000 subscribers prior to that.
Yeah.
And then that took me up to about 125,000.
Yeah.
So,
well, you've got 300,000 plus now. Obviously, people are interested in what you have to say.
I don't necessarily understand why, because I started the channel basically to prove somebody wrong when they said I should have a channel. I was like, nobody's going to watch this. And they kept insisting. So I made a video to be like, okay, nobody's going to watch this. And it turns out that people do. But I do think there is a real place for explaining the law, especially the legal profession is terrible at explaining laws to the ordinary person and to speaking to the ordinary person. And that's really where I want to be. So there's some other lawyers out there, mostly the Canadian market for like legal discussion is lawyers primarily talking to other lawyers. They'll explain legal concepts or they'll market. But my sort of mission is to ideally have people understand the world and what's going on around them. So when there's a story that makes the news, for instance, and they'll say, "Oh, why did this happen?" Well, often I can explain exactly why that happened. Like, here's the legal provisions. So that's what I try to do. And I'm grateful that people keep tuning in for it.
Well, thanks for giving us almost an hour of your time, Ian. I wanted to get into this. I was looking forward to the conversation. Listen, while we may not agree on everything, that's never the point. So thanks for doing the show.
Thank you so much. And if you ever want to come out to the range, let me know and we'll make it happen.
I will not rule that out. I've always been interested with that kind of stuff. That's Ian Runkle. Thanks again. You know him if you follow him already, like I know many of you do, at Runkle of the Bailey. You can find him on YouTube. That's his channel. You can also find him on Instagram. You can find him on X and the like. We have like hundreds and hundreds of comments. We're not going to be able to get to them all, but I want to get to a lot of them. And people approaching this from many different angles, which is like I said, John, that's what I absolutely love about this audience. That's the whole point of the show. So we're going to get into some of your comments. You can always send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com as well. If you're listening to this later, like 95% of the audience is going to listen or see this later. But it's the live stream comments in our live chat powered by Park Power that keep that conversation going. So that's where we're going to go right after I remind you about the incredible Real Talk partners that make sure that these conversations continue every single episode, and that includes the team at Friesen Brothers. Hey, watch this, John. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Hey, John, if you're not a hunter yourself, if you're not heading out to fill your family's freezer
Oh, come on.
with a moose or an elk or a whatever it is, Friesen Brothers has you covered.
We're covering
that's right.
betas.
That's right. Friesen Brothers Real Butchers are cutting up custom cuts of the absolute best Alberta beef, Alberta pork, Alberta chicken. You know they got bison in there. Nobody does it like Friesen Brothers. And I want to also make sure that if you're looking to maybe just forego cooking entirely, Oktoberfest is back at Friesen Brothers. You can find out more details on their website. That's friesen.com/Oktoberfest from September 19th through to October 16th. So it is underway at your local Friesen Brothers store. You can celebrate the season. Celebrate it with fun, food discovery, and specialty products that are not available all year round, from starters to desserts. Friesen Brothers has everything you need to create a memorable Oktoberfest experience at home. Check out, by the way, on their website, a recipe for bakery-style soft pretzels you can make at home. Why are they sharing this proprietary information? They are. They want to make you look like a genius. Find out all the details at friesen.com. Hey, if you have laundry all washed, dried, folded, and then just stacked up on the floor because your storage issue is precluding you from getting truly organized, it might be time to call California Closets. They're the best in the business when it comes to custom closets and storage solutions for the whole home. This is where form meets function. This is a beautiful installation, regardless of where you tap them on the shoulder to help you out. It could be a home office where they're going to hide the printer. They're going to hide all the charging cords and the cables. It's going to look magnificent day in and day out. Maybe it's a feature wet bar in your home's main gathering area, an entertainment center where the family relaxes together. California Closets designs it in Canada, manufactures it in Alberta, and installs it with a lifetime guarantee. You can request your free design consultation with them today. Nothing to lose. Talk budgets, talk timeline at californiaclosets.ca. Every Thursday here on Real Talk, our friends at Play Alberta are giving us an opportunity to celebrate wins, our home province. It could be spelling bee winners. It could be the volunteer spirit like it was in our most recent episode. Play Alberta, helping us celebrate Alberta's big wins. And I want to talk to you about how Alberta wins with Play Alberta. It's not only is it the most safe and secure way to bet casino, sports, and lottery online, but all revenue goes right back to the province. Now, this is a big deal. Albertans are also winning big every single day. $10, $50, even as much as $100,000 won daily on Play Alberta. And best of all, for a limited time only, new players can receive a $1,000 casino bonus. You can download the app for more information. That's the Play Alberta app. Check out all their great offers and get started today. More details at playalberta.ca. And John, I had a chance to meet with the team at UCAN Youth Services yesterday after we wrapped our episode. Hosted a lunch with the team from Thompson Construction Group. You remember I was telling you about the UCAN Comedy Nights? Mm-hmm. You can actually check out their comedy nights on their website. That's ucan.ca. They got more of these comedy nights coming up next spring, and I'm really looking forward to it. This has been their annual fundraiser that helps UCAN roll out these really, really incredible programs. 6 incredible nights of comedy. Well, we auctioned off a lunch with me and the team at Thompson Construction Group. Bought that lunch with a very generous donation to UCAN, and we had a chance to get everybody together yesterday. Amazing to hear them discuss work placement opportunities for UCAN ready to work, or they've got this road to work program in particular that's really amazing. But these UCAN clients, these young adults, 19 to 25, that are going to be entering the workforce after a 7-week training program, and the team at Thompson's figuring out over lunch, they're going, gosh, this sounds like this could be a really good fit for us. Sometimes they're hiring 100, 200, 300 different laborers at a time. To see those conversations happen, to see that potential partnership come together in front of my very eyes was just a really wonderful experience. I wanted to shout out Thompson Construction Group today for their support of UCAN, and I want to shout out the incredible team and the young people participating in UCAN's programs. This is our 2025-26 charity of choice for good reason. I get excited when I'm talking about it. You can learn more or maybe even connect with them about your own corporate or employment partnership by visiting ucan.ca. Ms. B in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says, how many of the gun owners are upset about there being a law, or are they just suggesting there are better ways to implement the law? She says, I sometimes feel like conversations like these are just hijacked by extremists.
100%, because we don't have recent polling on how federally Canadians feel about assault rifles. The last one we had was like in 2020, but even then, 86% of Canadians said they wanted stricter gun laws. And, of course, the lowest province was Alberta. I think 56% of them said they wanted it. But so we haven't had recent polling federally that shows. But I would think it's kind of maintained the same. People feel unsafe. They want stricter gun laws, especially on, the rifles that I guess Carney alluded to, these so-called, serious weapons. But as I said, I will give credit to Ian for coming on and trying to explain. It's extremely complicated. And you looked at that list. Ryan, I told you to come over to the computer. I said, Ryan, look how many guns are on this
2,500 guns.
Dude, you just scroll and scroll and scroll. And it's so there's a lot of weapons. I agree with Ian. Some people are going to not even know that a weapon they may have in their home or in a case or in the basement is now illegal.
Yeah. And there's a lot of context that's important too, which is why, we'll have these conversations with different people. And a lot of times we'll have the conversations with the folks in together, right? You want to have people from different groups that can oppose each other on camera. I wanted to bring Ian in specifically to talk about that Carney interview because he obviously takes issue with it. I thought it was interesting near the end. He talks about the fear mongering. He's talking about government fear mongering. And I guarantee as we start to scroll through our live chat here, there's probably going to be people that are saying, well, Runkle's fear mongering, talking about people having their doors kicked in, talking about people being thrown down by police on the front lawns. There were a couple of comments that I noted during the conversation, like, Whitrium says, nobody's coming to break down doors. Like, if you are caught with these illegal firearms, you'll face fines and prosecution like every other law, says Whitrium. In all caps, I guess, I probably should have yelled that. Justin, thanks for your YouTube membership. Justin says, that example of Ian talking about it, Ian had talked about clients that he's had or scenarios where, somebody absentmindedly is returning from hunting and forgets to unload their shotgun and has it in the back of the trunk or whatever. Justin says that example seems like pretty irresponsible gun owners transporting a loaded shotgun. He says, like the entire reason that these laws were written. So, you're going to have, everybody's going to have their own context. Like sure. There's people here, I think it was Dubious that said, when I was talking about a farmer or rancher and how hard I find it to believe that the RCMP are going to be going door to door in rural areas. Like, number one, that's just not happening. And I hate to invoke, one of Canada's great tragedies here. But when you think of the Mayerthorpe tragedy, we observed, the anniversary of that tragedy, and who will ever forget it when it approached this past spring, a significant anniversary, and it was hard to believe how much time had passed. But James Roscoe, who snuffed out the lives, who in cold blood murdered 4 Mounties before killing himself, Roscoe had a long-standing beef with law enforcement, and it was well known. One of the reasons, and I'm going off memory, I'm not going to go too deep. This isn't like a cold case file or a true crime episode. But what I remember of that is that he was well known to police, and there was a reason why those police officers were on that property. They were on that property to secure it before executing a search warrant. And I believe it was either they were targeting it was either a cannabis grow op, or they believed that there was stolen property on the farm, or whatever it was. They had police officers stationed on that property, and Roscoe knew it. And he snuck around and he fled the property. Everybody knows the story, I think, by now. Yeah. Remember the 2 guys that gave him a ride back, and he snuck in and got his firearm and ambushed these police officers, and then shot himself in the Quonset. Are you telling me that was there only one James Roscoe in Canada? Like, is there only one person that has a real beef? And I'm not saying that this is all rural people or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, are you telling me that with police resources already taxed like they are, with response times that we hear from Real Talkers all the time? We heard from a rural resident in Ontario. I think I read the email within the last couple of weeks. We've heard from many rural residents on the prairies that are telling us not if, but when property is stolen from their farm, or when there's a B&E, or when they have concerns about their family's safety. Oftentimes, not a slight against the cops, This is something, by the way, that Alberta's premier is vowing to fix with this hypothetical Alberta Police Service, Alberta Police Force, if it ever happens. Response times are like 45 minutes to 3 hours. Sometimes it's the next day. Are you telling me that we now have enough police officers, sheriffs? Like, who are we sending in? Bylaw officers? Are you kidding me? I'm joking. I'm being facetious. Like, we have enough cops that we're now going to go door to door into unknown scenarios where all these homeowners have prohibited firearms, and we're going to be commissioning police officers to go confiscate all these. I don't think it's happening. I can't see it happening. But to bring it full circle to Dubious's comment, I said, you're telling me that you believe that cops are going to go around and rob farmers, not say rob, confiscate rifles, shotguns from farmers and ranchers who need to protect their herd. Dubious says to me, nobody's protecting their herd. Nobody needs to protect their herd. That's absolutely untrue. We hear from people all the time. I remember getting an email from someone I'll never forget right here to Real Talk, to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We made some dismissive comment about coyotes, made some dismissive comment about whatever. Somebody wrote in and said, we have coyotes that are attacking calves before they're even fully out of their mama. Like, we have coyotes that are so brazen and bold. We know that's a fact. We know that they're limited. These are anecdotal stories. It doesn't happen all the time. But people have. I showed the video from a friend's security camera within the last year on the show. Like, someone's got cougars in the area, or there's like a grizzly bear targeting cattle. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen.
Of course.
And there is absolutely justification for farmers and ranchers to have firearms, for sport shooters to have firearms. And I have a really hard time believing that it's going to get to the point where the federal government in Canada, this Liberal government under Mark Carney, is going to start going after 150,000 firearms from otherwise law-abiding citizens.
So do I. And look, Ian was very knowledgeable today. I learned a lot from him. I'm glad he was on. I think we should have him back. But today we were talking about, the main point was this lie that Carney told on our show, and whether these raids are going to happen.
Alleged lie,
after these gun laws are changed or amended or whatever. And no, I don't think anyone's debating whether scenarios where police officers do gun raids or get into situations where they go to homes where they know firearms are present, whether those situations have a higher or escalating point of violence. Like, of course they're going to get icky. Those situations are murky. But today what we were talking about is whether after these laws are amended or changed, whether these voluntary buybacks, after they happen, whether these seizures are going to take place. And I don't think they're going to happen either, Ryan. I agree with you. Ian seems to think they are going to happen, and he's pretty hell-bent on that. But I'll just give you 4 examples here of other buybacks that happen in other countries. Australia, 1997, they did a voluntary buyback. It was mandatory for certain types of firearms, mostly semi-automatics and pump-action shotguns. They recovered 650 voluntarily given back rifles and shotguns and pump-action shotguns. And after the amnesty, the possession of those firearms became illegal. What happened? There were no mass door-to-door raids. Enforcement was compliant-based and not systematic home searches. In New Zealand, we know after the Christchurch, that mass shooting in 2019, they had a big gun buyback. Similarly, 6-month buyback, everyone was compensated, and it was accompanied by an amnesty. Afterwards, when the gun laws changed, police did not sweep through homes. Instead, they relied on tips from other people, and they also prohibited guns that turned up in other contexts.
Tips from other people is an interesting
that's why I wanted to mention that one especially. Brazil, they recovered 1.1 million guns in a voluntary buyback in 2023 and onward. After the program, unregistered or prohibited firearms could lead to criminal charges. But again, no systematic home searches. Seizures genuinely occurred if police encountered weapons in their day-to-day operations. And finally, Argentina, 2007 to 2008, another entirely voluntary and anonymous program. No penalties for participating unless the firearm was already illegal. Afterwards, laws changed. Enforcement came through law enforcement, not targeted retrieval. So history shows us, even if you want to, do all the fear and everything, that this is likely not going to happen in Canada. I don't think it's going to happen at all.
I want to get to as many comments here. Jillian says politicians generally won't do interviews if there's going to be any live fact checking or expert present. I do want to push back a little bit. I think
should we hire someone?
I just think that number one, I think that there's a bit of a misconception. I appreciate that Ian has every right to call me out and believe that, I should have, pushed back on the Prime Minister. I would argue that I did. And I don't think that this is the most important thing. You and I joke all the time. How does the Carney interview go? And all of my liberal friends are like, gosh, you just went right at him out of the gates. Gosh, you didn't even welcome him to the studio. My conservative friends are like, you didn't push him nearly as hard. And when Danielle Smith comes on 2 days later, as the only talk show in Alberta to have the Prime Minister and the Premier one-on-one in the same week, no big deal. What do the Liberals think? Or what do the NDP supporters think? That I was way too easy on Danielle Smith? And what do the Conservatives think? Well, why don't you even, so everybody's going to have their own take on this. Number one, there is fact-checking during interviews. And I want to be clear about something. Like when I play a Danielle Smith clip to the Prime Minister, right, we play it, and then you hear it in the show, and then I say, what's your response? Like, she says that they will not participate in confiscation. What's your response? And then he goes, well, first of all, there's not going to be confiscation. He says there will be compensation, but there won't be confiscation. Number one, the goal of this talk show, done, accomplished. Prime Minister's on the record. Then I say, so what you're saying is the Premier is mischaracterizing the situation. That is called circling back. That is called, right? Like, that's accountability. That's saying to the Prime Minister, so you're saying that Alberta's Premier is lying. And then he responds to that on the record. Mission accomplished. Then, and this is not making excuses. This is fact. Like when you're doing your job and somebody asks you, why did you do it the way that you did it? Whether you're a chef or a home builder or whatever you are, when we have 20 minutes and I'm not a gun expert and there's not only one story recovering, this was not Mark Carney for 20 minutes on guns. And if it was, then we would have a number of different case studies and we'd have a number of different things. It's not. It's the Prime Minister in studio for 20 minutes trying to ask him 15 questions on 15 different things. Imagine if we had the Prime Minister on and talked to him for 14 minutes on guns and not 1 minute on housing, or not 1 minute on the relationship with the United States, or not 1 minute on recognizing the state of Palestine or Israel bombing in Qatar, right? Like, interviews, you pick and choose where you go, and then the fallout from those interviews, or the ripple effect from those interviews, is that they drive other conversations like the one with Ian. So when Jillian says, like, politicians won't do interviews, and I understand the spirit of her comment, but they won't do interviews if there's live fact-checking, we're on it. Like, I'm not just sitting here chewing bubble gum while they talk. And at the end of the day, a lot of times it requires nuance and requires digging. And a lot of times, too, what we're doing is speculating. Nobody's getting their doors kicked in right now relating to this firearms plan by the federal government. It's not happening right now. There's no examples right now. So to say that the Prime Minister is lying, you're assuming that that is going to happen in future and that he's lying about it now. But it hasn't happened, right? So these are the gray areas where I think we need to have some nuance, right? We get the Premier on the record. We get the Prime Minister on the record. We get the Premier back on the record. We get a gun right lawyer on the record. And then we're going to get real talkers on the record. And if the conversation demands to be continued, we'll continue the conversation. I mean, that's kind of the whole purpose of a talk show, and that's kind of how they go. Mm-hmm. I just don't want anybody to think that we sit here, we have no background research, we have no idea what we're talking about, we're asking questions, people are lying to our face all the time. I think anybody would push back a little bit if their professional credibility was being called out, and I think that it's important to address it.
Yeah, and also, like you've said this before, you're an entertainer, you're a host, you're a moderator. You've never classified yourself as a journalist, but we do our best. Like, we're not part of the media. We don't spend months researching. Most times,
well, I'm not a gun expert.
Like, that's the other thing, and this thing is so complicated, but that's why we asked Ian to come on. And immediately when we saw his reply, we didn't have months to prep for him to come on. We just said, come on next week. And educate us, right? And another thing is, I think the people who listen to our show now know how you and I feel about guns. We both feel that there are legal gun owners out there. They use it for hunting. They use it to protect their property. They use it for livestock. They use it to put animals out of their misery. And a lot of them live here in Alberta, and I know them. I have family down in the south who are legal, law-abiding gun owners. But what I can't escape, and this is the thing conservatives kind of swerve around, they love to say facts before feelings, but here's the fact. The countries with the most guns have the most gun deaths. That's just a fact. It's Brazil. It's the States. And those places that I mentioned, those 4 countries that had buybacks, had immediate reductions in gun deaths after the buyback program. So when you're arguing for saying these gun deaths that happen in these countries are by all illegal gun owners. That doesn't make sense when after a buyback where 1.1 million guns were taken in Brazil, gun deaths went down. That means that legal gun owners that had guns and gave them back didn't shoot people.
First of all, credit Ian Runkle's back in our live chat right now.
I love that
with
he's in
audience
here.
members. So I think
Fact-checking
that's
us still.
awesome. I
Yeah.
think that's great. Continuing the conversation. Maybe we have something going here. As we're, you build these relationships, right? The audience deepens in its understanding of issues based on more expert analysis on the show. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everybody. That's never the point. I will say this: the government, the federal government, and by the way, provincial and municipal governments as well, all have a role to play in how the general public feels right now. And I will say boldly, when we talk to poll analysts like Philippe Fournier earlier in this episode, I think it's safe to say that many Canadians, I won't say all, but many Canadians do not feel safe right now, right? It's why Doug Ford's chiming in on this, because of that high-profile home invasion involving a crossbow in Ontario, and the homeowner protecting his family is now facing charges. Preposterous. Most people would agree with that. It's why Poilievre's hammering on it. It's why Carney has to address it. It's why Danielle Smith's talking about it. It's why crime and public safety is one of the top issues that are factoring into how people are going to vote in Alberta's municipal elections. And we heard the Premier talking about how, municipalities don't have jurisdiction on handgun bans. Google Toronto handgun ban if you want some more background on that and some more insight on that. But I will say this: politicians at every level are having to answer to the electorate on what they're going to do about the sense that people have that they're just not safe. And this is one of those ways. You're going to get detractors. You're going to get people critical of legislation, people that don't feel like the government is making a move in the right direction. And many of them will have many valid points. You may not consider the points to be valid, and you have a different perspective based on your context. And that's why we want to hear from you as well. If your family member was killed at L'École Polytechnique, or if your family member was shot in a robbery, or if your home was invaded, or if your rural resident is constantly being prowled, you're going to feel very differently than somebody in a downtown tower that feels very safe at home at night with a concierge at the front and 3 locking doors before you get to the elevator. People are going to have different perspectives on it, and this is not an all sides sort of a thing, but a just reminder to people, there are many sides to stories, and I think it's important to explore all of them. So you can let us know what you think. Again, to talk at RyanJesperson.com. You can share this episode on YouTube. You can share the podcast episode as well, and you can always hit us up on social media as well at Real Talk RJ. I have a feeling, although we do have a bit of a unique flamethrower coming up, our final episode of the week this week is going to be tomorrow. It's going to be on Wednesday. Doing some business travel out to Toronto, but I will say we have a submission. The gun comments may get in this week's flamethrower presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, but we have a very unique submission for the flamethrower.
I saw this in the email
You and I
today.
have to talk about this.
I'm gonna keep it under wraps.
Someone took their flamethrower submission to a whole other level.
Creative.
Very creative with some production value.
Yeah.
I
appreciated it.
Yeah,
I appreciated
it. And so I think that the flamethrower in our next episode may be quite a bit different than previous ones. But you can always send us an email for consideration at talk@RyanJesperson.com.
And I do want to say, I want to thank Ian one more time because he is in the chat. And I know that now we have an expert. We have someone with legal expertise and massive gun knowledge, because we're going to be talking about this as things move forward with the Carney government. And as this buyback, when it happens, if it happens, and the post, it's great to know that we can have Ian to come back on, someone that people trust and knows a lot about this.
Yeah. Ken K in our live chat powered by Park Power says responsible gun owners keep their guns in a locked safe and the ammo in a second locked location. That effectively eliminates guns for home defense. That from Ken K. Super Chat Ken, meantime, says, I'd prefer the approach of how much damage can a firearm do as opposed to the model of the gun. Ken says restrictions on capacity make more sense to me. I think that.
Have you ever wanted to go to a gun range? Have you ever?
I have gone to a gun range.
So you've used a firearm?
Yeah, a few times. I'm not a gun guy. I respect. I've got nothing against it. Married into a hunting family. Lots of my friends have guns. I got no problem with them.
But was it entertainment,
it's not my thing.
Or did you want the knowledge?
It was pure entertainment.
Okay.
I mean, I guess a little bit of both probably, but yeah, I fired a shotgun and a couple of handguns and I don't know, like a 22 and like my buddy, I think it was called a 30-06. Gun owners will know. I don't know.
So I'm not a gun person, never have been, but since moving to Alberta and just recently, I've wanted to I mean, maybe it's like me watching, doomsday shows, but I just want to learn how to use one, how to properly put on a safety, load a firearm, all that. So I'm actually thinking of going soon. So maybe it's something I'll kind of document and bring back to the show. But I'm not someone who's like, I live in reality. Their firearms are always going to be around. You can buy back as many as you want. You can stop illegal guns. You can stop the use, the marketing and sale of like Ian referenced, new handguns in Canada. But they're always going to be a part of life in the world. So why not learn how to use one safely? Learn how to pick it up. Learn how to put the safety on and off. Shoot a few targets. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think that's great, actually. Yeah. And I think like if we're going to have opinions on things, like some people are just going to be like, no thanks, hard pass. In so many ways as many folks got into baking sourdough during the pandemic, John.
Dude,
and some people just had no interest whatsoever. And that's fine. But again, I say this, we're going to stamp it on shirts, like seek to understand. I would rather understand. I'd rather know.
Of course.
And people will say, and I get this, and for the most part, I'm inclined to agree. Like when we look at, we look at these horrific, I mean, I think of like that country music concert in Las Vegas when like 50 plus people are killed. We look at these horrific shootings in schools. I mean, even the Charlie Kirk, like just there's many examples, way too many examples. And people will often say like, why does anybody need, like Ian brought it up or how he characterized it. What did he call it? Like a weapon of war or something like that, or a tool of war. And you see that, and it is loaded language. It's supercharged language. Absolutely. And you can, if you need to, in debate format, justify describing it as that because it is. Like, you can't tell me that somebody rolls in with an AR-15 and can't, what does Samuel L. Jackson say in Paul, rain down hell in furious anger, whatever he says, not to make light of it, but like, yeah, obviously somebody with the right weapon can go on a killing spree and it will outrage the public, if only temporarily. And people will say, well, why does anybody need to own these? And then someone else will say, like the Premier did at the beginning of the quote that we played. Not her exact words, by the way, but I'm just saying, like a vehicle. And some will accuse me of a bad faith argument here. I'm just making a point. If somebody wants to mow down everybody at a cultural festival, or if somebody wants to target a family that's out for a walk, these are real things that have happened in Canada within the last few years. A family based on their ethnicity or their religion or some other matter. A vehicle can be used as a weapon of war, so to speak, to commit something heinous. So, I mean, like, I try to find that spot in the middle. What is my gut instinct? Try to take the political or partisan angle out of it. What do we think is reasonable policy? What is fitting policy for a government in a nation with about 45 million people, a relatively young nation that's experiencing some growing pains, that obviously struggles with issues like crime, but how do you at the same time preserve the rights and allow for the recreational enjoyment of things like firearms? You can't tell me that, like, a dad and a mom that are taking their kids out hunting for the first time, or somebody that's teaching their niece or nephew how to shoot skeet or whatever, that's not positive, that's something we need to outlaw. Yeah. I don't think anybody believes that we need to outlaw that kind of stuff. And I don't want to be part of a nation that's starting to crack down to that degree, that loses its ability for nuanced, intuitive, responsible lawmaking, and that's the sweet spot we're trying to find.
I love it. And like I said, I'm not saying Garth LeBeach, is that how I pronounce it in our chat?
Garth LeBeach,
who was on our show, was he not?
Love Garth.
Yeah, so he said, Johnny, are you saying that with the gun buyback, gun crimes will go away? I'm not saying that at all. What I was just doing is, while they were having this interview, I went and looked up previous buybacks, and in every situation, in every country, immediately after, gun deaths were reduced. And these were legal, for the most part, gun owners giving back old guns that were going to be prohibited after the amnesty was over, and gun deaths went down. I'm just showing some facts. And M. Aiken says, come out to the farm and I'll take you out and show you how to fire a gun.
She's already
I will not
that,
be lured into that situation.
No, M. Aiken's a friend of the show.
Of
she
course
reached out.
Yeah,
She's invited us. Super Chat Ken says, I'm fine with making handguns very, very hard to get. Scarlett is in our chat, and she basically says, like, listen, guys, she says this stuff happened. What about what happened in Nova Scotia? She says this is way more common than anybody wants to admit. Jill says a Colorado man in a rural area murdered 3 cops a few days ago. Like, let me give you even just a frame of reference for me. And if you're like me, your opinions or your takes on anything in the news, any law or any story that develops is probably based on, like, people this happened to, or you can relate to this because life is complicated, right? Not everything is black and white. Not everything is conservative or liberal. Not everything's blue or red or blue or orange if you're in the province of Alberta, right? Like, I worked for several years with someone who I still have a great appreciation for, a journalist, Kathy Mueller. And John, her brother, Sergeant Eric Mueller. I'm showing him on my screen right now. You can read this at memorialribbon.org. It's a punch in the gut to even tell you what website to look at if you want to see more information. But I'm showing my screen right now, John. Sergeant Eric Mueller is my friend Kathy's brother. On May 11th, a couple of years ago, May 11th of 2023, Sergeant Eric Mueller responded to a call approximately 2 a.m. Russell County, Ontario Provincial Police Sergeant with 2 other officers dispatched to a disturbance at a home in the municipality of Clarence Rockland, which is maybe about a half-hour's drive out of downtown Ottawa. Somebody reported hearing a gunshot. The officers arrived on scene. This was particularly disturbing because the body cam video of this was actually released and made public. So this officer, Eric Mueller's murder, was released for public consumption. I know that's been very difficult on the Mueller family, including my friend Kathy. But the subject ambushed them with a so-called long gun, injuring all 3 officers, and Mueller, 42 years of age, died in hospital. He started his career with the OPP as a special constable, serving for more than 20 years, promoted to sergeant in 2018. He leaves behind 2 young children and a loving wife, of course, family, friends, and colleagues, and he will be forever remembered. This is a horrific scenario. This is one example of several, but this is one that hits home for me. So when we're talking about Sergeant Eric Mueller, or when we're talking about how police approach, responding to calls where they know that or suspect there's going to be firearms in the home, of course, they're going to treat it a little bit differently. That doesn't mean that that's how police are going to respond every single time somebody calls the snitch line and says, I believe that my 84-year-old neighbor who's been hunting this, farming this land for 65 years has a shotgun that may or may not be on that list of prohibited firearms. I don't think that SWAT is showing up to kick in his door. And if I'm wrong, I'll eat my words. And if I'm wrong, heaven forbid, and if that does happen in Canada, we've got a huge problem on our hands.
100%. And this issue, it's so nuanced because there's a lot, and they're talking about it in our chat right now. Like, what's the goal here? Is the goal to lower gun deaths, or is the goal to lower gun crime? Because I think gun crime is the main issue that people are concerned about. Like, crime, theft, gunpoint leads to shooting, people die. Or is it just gun deaths in general? Because the buyback will probably lower gun deaths if history tells us anything. But is that what we're trying to do? Or are we trying to reduce gun crime? Is it better to be robbed at gunpoint but survive, or be murdered by weapons? So this is a very nuanced conversation, and I'm glad we have Ian Runkle still in the chat and that we can have him back to debate again.
Yeah.
Not debate. We just chatted.
Well, I'm happy to have debates. I love having debates. But, I just want it to be informed, and I want people to feel like they have, I want people to feel like, you have a voice. If you have a reasonable position on something, then I believe that in a show like this, you should have your opportunity to share your position. And I think also we will reserve the right to clarify where we believe that positions are unreasonable. But I think Ian brought a reasonable perspective to the table. You don't have to agree with him. That's perfectly fine. I hope that, it's kind of funny. We always joke when someone will write into the show and say, I don't agree with you on everything, but I go, yeah, I'd be super concerned if you agreed with me on absolutely everything. It would be weird. Dan S. in our live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, says sport shooting used to be like one shot every 3 minutes. He's probably talking about the muskets and the things you had to pack. He says now they need 30 shots in a minute. He says that's not sport shooting anymore. He says it's belligerent. Interesting. White Dream wonders if all the guns in Canada are removed, how many gun crimes will happen? Number one, obviously never going to happen. And number two, the argument that Ian makes, and I know people, this was when people were talking about Stephen Harper and the gun registry as well. People are saying, who is it? And this is true, guys. Like, this is fact. Like, who is most likely to comply with new gun regulations? It's law-abiding citizens. Who is least likely to comply? It's the people that own illicit firearms. It's the people that own stolen firearms or that are stealing firearms. And it's people that intend to use the firearms in the commission of a crime, right? So I don't believe, like, number one, I don't believe that governments can do nothing. And I believe that government needs to keep up with the times. And I believe that government's one of the government's number one roles is to ensure public safety, utilizing the police, which is one of the biggest budget line items for any municipality, bar none. And at the same time, like, I believe that we need to be reasonable and use common sense on the role that legislation plays and, like, who's going to comply with it. That's not to say that we just give up. That's not to say that governments just go, wow, criminals are never going to surrender their guns anyway, so we won't have any sort of a gun surrender program. The question is what flies politically and otherwise. That story is nuts, by the way. The public safety minister, right? Gary Anandasangari, talking to his tenant on video. It's not a good look for the federal government for this guy. And I would suggest that this guy probably, maybe the next cabinet shuffle will probably be moved out of this portfolio. It would be interesting to see, and I'm not exactly sure who it would be. I don't see Corey Hogan getting tapped on the shoulder for this, but maybe a Western MP tapped on the shoulder, or maybe a rural Ontario MP tapped on the shoulder to be the next Minister of Public Safety if they're going to be leading the charge on this one, because this is a big one. Before we wrap, John, I want to talk just a quick second about EPCOR. Did you hear, by the way, there was some new data out. Did you see that Edmonton's tap water has actually been voted the best tasting tap water in Canada?
What? Are you
100% true.
Hello.
This is absolutely true. This is EPCOR and the Glass of the Sask campaign. We've been talking about it. You've probably seen on set. We're offering all of our in-studio guests a glass of the Sask. That's right. The award-winning water out of Edmonton's North Saskatchewan River. Someone's going to give us heck for referring to it as Edmonton's North Saskatchewan River. But the river that is an essential resource and that has shaped and sustained Alberta's capital city. Earlier this month, Edmonton's tap water was actually named the best tasting in all of Western Canada. Oh, yeah, that's right. And that means that EPCOR's team is taking our local tap water to compete for the title of Best in North America in Washington next year. I want to be on this trade mission.
Bring home that hardware, baby.
I want to be on this. How much water do they bring at a time, I wonder?
What do they get on a plane with
Yeah,
water?
they're going to bring the Glass of the Sask to D.C.
I hope it's like a spy movie when they
To
open the
compete-
case
of
and
course
there's like
it is.
dry ice comes out and they're like,
Absolutely.
have a glass.
It's going to be like the briefcase is like handcuffed to somebody's wrist, and they want to make sure that they protect it. But, hey, we're having fun with this because it's obviously an awesome honor for the team at EPCOR and for anybody that lives in Alberta right now. You can learn more about the Glass of the Sask campaign. It's on tap. It's made local by EPCOR at epcor.com. Hey, our friends at Solar by Kubi reminding you they are still out there. Their teams in Alberta, BC, they'll travel to Saskatchewan, Yukon, Northwest Territories, big projects installed, helping businesses, helping agricultural producers, and helping everyday homeowners achieve their sustainability goals and save money on their electricity costs. Can you imagine opening your power bill and not having a heart attack? Can you imagine? You know, the average solar system these days is paying itself off in 5 to 10 years. And with the Canada Greener Homes Loan, that means that you can get into solar without putting the money up front, interest-free for that entire time period. The team at Kubi, that's KUBY.ca. The team at Kubi can take you through all of it. It is solar simplified and people-powered. You can request a free solar quote today. Again, that's at Kubi.ca. And there's exciting things happening at the biggest university in Alberta. A new era of health research has just launched at the U of A with the establishment of the Diane and Irving Kipnis Health Research Institute. This will bridge the gap between scientific discovery and health outcomes. It's going to accelerate the translation of research into real-world care and improving the lives of patients across Canada. John, this gift blows my mind. A transformative $25 million gift. The Kipnis Institute is going to transform the future of healthcare for Canadians and beyond. You can learn more about it by visiting uab.ca/Kipnis. That's uab.ca/Kipnis.
Well, you're welcome for the extra long show, Debbie Downers out there who like it or don't like it when we leave early.
Or people, yeah, well, there you go. I mean, sometimes it's just real. Sorry, John, I'm just...
Oh, a glass
just
of the
enjoying
Sask.
a glass of the Sask.
How's it taste, Ryan?
Well, it tastes like North America's best tasting tap water. Is what it
Flavorless
tastes
and
like.
clear.
Absolutely, and I love this. We're getting some jurisdictions here. Some of you sharing that you believe that where you live, it is the best tasting tap water on planet Earth. We might have to.
Wow.
We might have to turn this into a thing.
I can't remember the last time I cracked the tap, and I usually, I'm straight from the Brit every day.
Yeah,
but
you know me.
I'll have to try it.
I'm straight from the tap. Always have been, and I think it's something to be really proud of. So
You're a tap guy.
yeah. PNC Bio says it is always the case. It's the criminals who don't follow the law. Says, I guess we don't need a law against murder, guys, since only murderers will break it. Okay. I appreciate the tongue-in-cheek response, and I'm happy to be here to debate this as time moves forward.
I do want to also note, because, I have been laying, all these numbers down. From 2000 to 2020, research done showed that 75% of gun deaths in Canada were suicide.
Say that again, 75%?
75% from 2000 to 2020 in Canada, 75% were from suicide.
Wow.
So.
Scarlett, with another, I think, a striking observation, and I don't think this is fear-mongering. I think Scarlett makes a fair point. She says, I would also add that a lot of the rhetoric around civil war right now, she says people starting backyard militias, says it's all very concerning. Let's not forget the story that we covered about a month ago. Maybe it was 3 weeks ago. Remember, RCMP laying terrorism charges in Quebec against 4 individuals, either retired or non-active duty. What do you call them in the military? And then 2 active duty military members as well. So there's a story. And then, you even look, I'm not trying to spend too much time on this. I don't want to get into this to a great degree. We've talked a lot about Charlie Kirk. We've covered it from a number of different angles. But I think that a lot of the commentary that was happening in and around his memorial service, which was attended obviously by thousands and watched by millions, some of the conversations around so-called civil war or what this means, them against us, it does feel like the temperature is rising. It does feel like the rhetoric's getting a little bit out of control. So I don't blame people like Scarlett for feeling a little bit tense around all of this, especially when we're talking about firearms.
Yeah. Oh, Matthew, the press release in our chat says the press release for the buyback program just dropped in the news section on Canada's website. So now we have to go do more homework, guys, for tomorrow.
Okay. Well, there you go. The good news is that the conversations continue. I believe this is the longest episode we've done in a while. And so we will bid adieu so we can start working on tomorrow's show. As we have shared with you already, a very special episode of the show, which will be our final for the week. And then we're right back at it again next week with a great lineup. I have never in my life had an opportunity to interview Biff naked, and I've always loved her work. A new documentary out featuring her life and her journey. Biff will join us live in studio right here in the Mercer Warehouse. We hope you'll join us. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.